Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. Join me as we explore approaches and orientations towards cultivating the physical body, the internal landscapes, the mind, and our relationship with reality as a whole. I'm your host, Craig Mallet. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started with this week's episode, just a few quick notes. First of all, you'll notice that I've been stuffing around with the intro music. I'm probably going to change it one more time before this. I don't mind it now. I'll get tired of it, no doubt, at some point, and then change it up again. But I do have something more permanent in the works. I've got some friends who are more musically inclined helping me out with making something quite nice. So expect to hear that change a few more times. For now, it's just a minor change while I wait for the real one to take place. Other than that, it's getting towards Christmas. I have plenty of stuff on my to-do list, more courses to come. There are loads already out. I've just dropped the non-dual course, which is a hour and a half recording from one of my recent workshops. And I quite liked listening back to the recording. It went better than I expected. And so I decided to make it available for everyone. It's super, super cheap. Yeah, and it's in amongst all the other courses there. So yeah, check that one out if you've got time, just on courses.craigmallet.com. And as always, I have my practice of the week. It's now available both on the Thinkific platform where the other courses are available. You'll see practice of the week there as a kind of subscription-based course, or you can go through Patreon still. I've adjusted the membership levels based on the interaction I'm actually having. So yeah, check it out in either place. They're the same courses, so you don't need to do both. The practice of the week on Patreon is identical to the practice of the week on Thinkific. I'm going to run both platforms side by side for a while and see what people like. Of course, as these things go, as soon as I launch the Thinkific one, a whole stack of people registered to Patreon. So I'm going to leave them both there for a little while, and maybe I'll just keep running them side by side. It's not too hard to do the upload of the video twice, and that way people have a choice of platforms. So yeah, those are just the two little notes I thought I'd leave you with. Without further ado, here's the episode. All right, everyone, welcome to the podcast. I've got my longtime friend Nil Teisner here, and Nil is a practitioner of let's say soft acrobatics as a general category, but I'll let him give some more details about that. Neil and I met in 2017 in Munich. I was in Europe at the time and going around teaching some workshops. It was kind of the golden age of movement where everyone was just starting and exploring some stuff, and we connected in Munich and hung out a bunch, and we've kind of stayed in touch since then, just on and off. And I've been very happily watching Neil's development from the sideline, and oddly enough, with my journey kind of moving out of the movement and into the internal cultivation. And I've always had this thought that if I get back into movement, I'm going to talk to Neil as my first stop. We'll see if that happens, but I'm nevertheless very happy to have Neil here, and he's going to share a little bit about his journey and his discoveries and his learning. And I know he's got a really kind of strong philosophy behind his movement that is not just about doing the stuff. It's got more depth than that, and a kind of artistic heart to it. So hopefully we can get into some of the nitty-gritty of that in this. So yeah, I'll maybe hand over to Neil now. You can introduce yourself and give a bit of your background, and we'll just go from there. We're going to keep it super, super casual. Don't stress about making it professional or anything. My podcasts are all really, really low key. So just, yeah, let her rip, Neil. Tell everyone what you're about, and we'll kind of dive down some rabbit holes after that.
On the introduction and invitation, Craig. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, the practice that I'm doing is changing a lot now. So like when we met, 8 years ago, it was a little bit different, but I guess a core element has always been there, which is I love to express myself through physicality. That's like a big thing for me as a child, climbing trees and running around in the dirt, in the rain, whatever, everything basically imitating anime characters in my room back then. But yeah, I've been going through a lot, from skateboarding into CrossFit and more the movement culture approach that was still strong when we met back then.
Mhm.
And since then, I figured out that a big part of the physicality that I really enjoy is in the acrobatic realm, right? So everything that has to do with giving up to gravity, tumbling, falling, leaping, bringing myself into weird shapes physically, but then also in a more mental way, right? So also going into all of these positions also challenges myself and inspires me on an internal level.
Mhm.
So yeah, but to put it very practical, I do a lot of acrobatics from different styles, be it capoeira, gymnastics, breaking recently. I just love to move in this way and combine and yeah, test myself out creatively, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's like a big part. And besides that, I do a little bit of taking care of the body, a bit of strength and outdoor practices. But like the main thing currently is acrobatics still.
Yeah, nice. Just for the listeners who aren't maybe that familiar with the acrobatic world, I thought I'd kind of point out that this way of moving is really, I use the term soft acrobatics. I don't know who came up with that
Mhm.
term. It might have been an Edo thing or something like that, or maybe he swiped it from somewhere else. I don't know, but if you've ever watched like the Olympic gymnastics, they're all very kind of linear, and they've got this very like stiff, like a very stiff spring that can like hit the ground and just fly into the air and go and flip around
Mhm.
and then land. And your style or your approach is way more, I would say, like organic than this, right? It's got this kind of like
Mhm.
flow and this movement between, like you said, all these funny shapes. So it tends to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from everything I've
Mhm.
seen, it tends to stay a little closer to the ground, even though you end up upside down and inverted. You're not getting too much of these like hard punching into the ground and flying up
Yeah.
challenges while doing 10,000 like of a similar twist. So it's kind of more. mm, yeah, more artistic in that way than this like linear expression of a skill that you might see with gymnastics, acrobatics. So maybe you could talk a bit to
Mhm.
that for like as if the people have just never heard of acrobatics.
Of course, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you put it quite nicely that in general, I'm more interested in the quality of movement and the transitions also between the moves, um, as the techniques themselves, right? So, as you said, there is, for example, the gymnastics that people are familiar with. There are so many different styles of acrobatics and so many ways of doing it, from very hard and fast, like in gymnastics, or what they call tricking also. Then there is very soft, flowy ways, like they also do in capoeira. Then there is very creative ways, like they do in breakdance. And I try to merge and take what inspires me most. And usually it happens to be the more softer, artistic, flowy side of things. Although I also do sometimes like to experiment with like a more like say tense quality develop into a human spring basically.
Mhm.
So I like it all, but generally speaking, I think my wheelhouse is more the flowy side, kind of like water dancer,
Yeah,
if you
nice.
will.
Yeah,
Mhm.
cool. So can I get you to talk a little bit? You've done like a lot of teaching up until this point. You've got a bunch of
Mhm.
online courses. You do workshops all around the world, and I maybe want you to like let people know what the beginner's introduction to this stuff looks like. What are people facing when they've come to you and they have never been upside down in their life, and then they're like, I want to learn how to do this stuff. What's the in between the start and where you're at, where it's like looks really cool and maybe unapproachable for people? Because it's really it's there's method and there's steps that adults can learn, right? You don't need to start this stuff as a 6-year-old like you do with some forms of dance and gymnastics to get anywhere with it. It can be taught to adults, right?
Yeah, beautiful question. And actually, starting off, I also did learn this as an adult. I was young still, like 20, around 20, but still, it's more like in the adult age than being a kid at 6. Um, and I also learned through teachers and mentors who had a great method. And to come back to the question, because I think it's a really good question, there is a couple things that people usually struggle with at the start, right? It's this idea of I am right now here and I want to be able to get there, like of these crazy inversions and whatever. So it's a matter of imagination. I can't imagine moving like this. So that's a thing. Then obviously fear is a big part now. Usually we are not going upside down a lot and rolling and twisting and flipping and all of that. So it's I'm scared what will happen. Will I injure myself? Will I land on my shoulder? All of these fears will kick in. Then it's also a matter of pure physicality. I'm simply not able to bend like this. I'm not able to hold myself into these positions. So all of these will be tackled through very basic um, regressions that really anyone or almost anyone can do. So one of the big things that I like to introduce people to is simply connecting to the floor, to the ground, right? Um, Usually we stand, sometimes we sit on the ground, but then we can do so much more. We can go into many different sitting and lying positions. We can try to find transitions between them. Can we go from lying on the belly into kneeling in 3 different ways, right? So it's a lot about kind of getting to know the body, your structure in this low level. And that's really something also, if you want to call it this, quite therapeutic in a way, because you're working all of your ranges, mm, building a lot of very interesting strength and mobility down there. And then the beautiful thing is, because acrobatic is also something that comes from the ground, all of the ground-based movements can also kind of like flourish into all of these acrobatic things later on. It's actually, acrobatic moves are quite simple in a way, as they all are kind of like connected with very basic floor transitions and steps in a way. So this is really something that with all people I do a lot is get on the ground, work on the ground a lot, try to experiment what that feels like. And then a second step is leaving the ground. And that doesn't mean jumping, but for example, instead of standing and going onto all fours, can we momentarily go onto 2 arms, for example? And there's different ways. You don't need to go into a full handstand. You can just hover slightly, right? So for me, very importantly, is something that I say at all workshops and with all the people that I coach, is that acrobatics is very subjective. There is not an acrobatic move, but there is an acrobatic approach to practice. And for some, handstand is acrobatic. For others, just placing both of your hands on the floor and for just a second, maybe just jumping 10, 15 centimeters off the ground and just like floating on your hands for a second. That's also acrobatic. And this is something that I really find valuable for beginner students to understand, that an acrobatic practice already starts as soon as you adopt this acrobatic mindset. Something interesting maybe for the viewers out there, uh, the word acrobatics, I always speak about this because I find it fascinating. The word acrobatics comes from ancient Greek akrobateo, which means to walk on tiptoes, roughly translated.
Cool.
So there's already this notion of, yeah, you're in balance, but the balance is very subtle. You could easily tip over. So it's like this play with being just on the edge. And something like this you can easily implement also as a as an elderly person, which I also have students. So yeah, I guess that's a good answer already.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Yeah, part of the thing with the internal training that I'm really focusing on is that I saw really, really over and over again that people diving into this internal training can lose their physicality. They get so
Mhm.
focused on alchemy and these things, and you see some of the masters of this stuff can do incredible stuff with the internal aspect of things, but then they don't really look like they can run, and they don't really look like they can jump, and they don't really look like the physicality is there. Mainly because it's like a use it or lose it thing, right? If you
Mhm.
just focus on inside stuff, that stuff gets better, and the stuff you don't focus on kind of atrophies. So I always had this idea that with this body here. And I think there's a Greek philosopher, I can't remember which one, that said it's like a real shame to live your life and not experience the physicality of a body, of what it's capable of.
Mhm.
And this body is temporary and we're all going to lose it when we die, but that doesn't mean we can just disregard it, right?
Mhm.
I always like to think to treat it well, and let it
Mhm.
express its capability. And so I had this idea that, I never wanted to be a top level performer, but I did want to have like a basic capability that I took through to the end of my life. If I can get to
Mhm.
90 and I can still jump and I can still run upstairs and I can still or even run. And more specifically, can I still move in these kind of weird, wriggly ways? Like the mobility is still there in the system, the aliveness is still there in the system. That's like, okay, how do I get to there? How do I train now so that it supports that long-term vision? And one of the things I really am interested in exploring, and it's something I did with Simon Thacker way back in the day, is this idea of the springy body. Keeping the body
Mhm.
springy, that it can bounce and it can kind of absorb and express power to a degree. And part of that is like this capacity to meet the ground and fall, essentially, like break falls and things like that, without
Mhm.
getting these jarring like things that would normally break a hip or injure some part of the body. So getting that kind of like softness, but the springiness too, into the body. So yeah, maybe you can talk about your approach to keeping the supple but powerful spring aspect of the body alive, and the
Mhm.
falling on the floor as well.
Yeah, beautiful as well. Um, One thing that directly comes to mind is because I also come from a sports science background when I studied at university, just quickly reminds me of that thing that because we have different types of muscle fibers now, some types that are more endurance based tend to stay longer into older age, and the more springy type that can really contract fast is lost easier. So having some sort of physicality that is able to also quickly go into a different position, maybe start running is quite helpful also. So I do view it also as a quite a vital aspect, that we can stay reactive in a way, no? Um, well, and the way that I take care of that um, i- is basically through practice. In acrobatics, it's already part of it, so I don't need to concern myself with it too much because it's already there, and that's the beauty of an acrobatic practice. That if you start one, you will develop that, right? So that's also the beauty of so many different practices. Like beautiful complex practice like climbing already has so much things inside of it that you don't have to then train separately a lot. So with acrobatics already this ability to switch positions and to catch yourself, because you will fall in acrobatics, is already there. um, and then in terms of falling and catching yourself on the floor, it's also something that I'm deeply inspired by. um, and like a mentor, a teacher of mine, Tom Wexler, he once put it very nicely, and I've been using it since, is the idea that rolling is the bread and butter of every human being who likes to leave the formal linear world, basically, right? So as soon as you step into more dynamic forms, rolling really becomes a necessity because you will fall. Anyone who participated in any handstand practice or maybe parkour jumping a lot, the falls will occur. It's it's not just a probability. You will do it. So learning how to do it seems to be very helpful. Mm. Bec- I mean, I also do have a big, strong background in skateboarding, so I learned it very intuitively. And also in skateboarding, falling is really it will happen every session probably. So over time, you hopefully learn how to catch yourself in a way that is sustainable. Um, but then also, like through Tom Wexler, the teacher, and other inspiring figures, I understood that diving deeper into this art of receiving the floor, as they call ukemi, right, in martial arts, is not just a necessity, but also a beautiful art in itself. So I've been focusing a lot on it and also teaching a lot of it. Um, um, there is, for example, another inspiring thing that directly comes to mind is the art of contact improvisation. It's a beautiful dance improvisation form developed in the 70s. And the guy who was part of the development was an aikidoka also. So he knew how to roll, and then he all of a sudden performed all of these humbling things with two people all of a sudden in a very improvisative manner. So there is a lot of fields that have been inspiring me on this journey. Now, if anyone at home wonders, like, how can I start that? I also want to be able to fall and catch myself. It again boils down to this idea of, can you feel comfortable moving on the floor? So from a kneeling position, can you somehow find yourself maybe over the shoulder going onto your back? So there's already a small roll inside of that, right? Um, so this could be something that anyone at home uh, could give a try. And from there, many different forms of different rolls over the shoulders, over the back, over the bum will appear. And I, I view it as extremely beautiful, and for what I do also as very necessary.
Yeah, I also think it is necessary, not to a high degree, but to a at least beginner degree for basically anyone. Because you said in acrobatic practice we're going to fall, but in life we're just going to fall at some point. Like, you're old people, we lose our coordination. You can trip easily. You can have something you don't expect knock you over as well. It's probably going to happen. And this is one of the things I really see with the modern world is, right, everyone hits this kind of like 20, 25 years old, and it's probably getting earlier these days as well. And they just stop falling and they stop jumping. And then at some point they're in their 30s and they haven't run for a long time. And there's this kind of notion that it's because you get older that these
Mhm,
seeds stop being available. But it's, from my perspective, it's more that we stop using it. We stop
mhm,
stimulating ourselves this way. And I know I spent a lot of time when I was doing more kind of heavy movement stuff, especially with elderly people, just playing games like you're talking about. It's like you're standing, get down to lying without using your hands. And how many different ways
mhm,
can you do that? And like stimulating the, well, I've done that way and I've done that way, and what are the other options? And just having that kind of wrestle did phenomenal things for people. People were healing knee problems and hip problems, but also like by the nature of the work, having to reconnect with themselves physically, because you can't do that stuff with lots of options without connecting to what your legs feel like and what your body feels like, because in all those different positions the muscles start working. And so I
mhm,
really found that this was it's a super important thing. And as I noticed recently, there was a moment where I was like, I've been so focused on meditation and whatever else that I haven't actually jumped around like that in a while. And so I made myself get back into it, and it's so much fun as well. It's just ridiculous amounts of fun. I go to parties with like little kids and they're giggling when I'm rolling and stuff like this. Like, you can really participate in a lot of life. And I've got a bub on the way, and I'm really excited to be able to play with my child in that way. So yeah, I think it's, even if you're not into acrobatics, I think it's a really good thing to pursue. And you don't have to get it to
mhm.
like an Instagrammable level, right? It doesn't have
Nah,
to
for
look
sure.
like a professional art performance.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's good that you say that, obviously life is also, falling, failing is part of that. So having a basic know-how is very helpful, to say the least. And I guess that's also something that, falling usually, like you were saying, after 20 or 25, usually doesn't happen so often anymore. So as soon as it happens, it is an odd sensation. It feels like a loss of control. And then also, if you see it on the street, someone falling, usually everyone stops, and it's like a moment, right? Which
Mm.
surely it makes sense, but me as a skateboarder, as an acrobat, it is so normal to me. It's very normalized to fall. And that's also something in my work, in the workshops that I try to do. Even if there is people joining who are not so interested in acrobatics, they usually get very inspired by the falling practice to really have a sense of, well, it's quite okay to fall, right? So A, because I'm not gonna hurt myself. There is some basic things that I can do, and B, like the whole concept of it is also it's okay. Um, there is also this mental block that some people have towards falling, which also makes sense, right? When you're going down a street and there is like a paved road, you don't want to fall. It's concrete, so there is this resistance. You're resisting it also, and as soon as you start practicing a little bit and getting comfortable with the floor, this resistance also fades, and that doesn't mean that you will fall more likely. Um, but you're much more relaxed. And studies do also show that the less you are afraid of falling, the less likely it is going to happen. So that's the beauty of it also. The more we resist, the more likely it is going to happen.
Yeah, interesting. Do you find there's a carryover into other parts of life? You know, we've got a culture that's also very afraid of failing in general, of getting things wrong,
Mhm.
or of not, finishing a project or whatever. Do you find this like physical act of what's essentially a failure of keeping ourselves upright, of falling,
Mhm.
has a carryover into other parts of life?
Well, for me personally, 100%. Because of the skateboarding and all of the playful things I've been doing and now the acrobatics, I know that failure is simply part of the process and I can easily embrace it. But then the very interesting aspect becomes, can you translate this into other areas, into more the mental game also, when, I don't know, starting something in your business or anywhere else. And for me, I have to say it does work, although it is work, right? It is not as simple as you do acrobatics, you fall and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, falling simply happens, so let's start this business project. If it doesn't work out, well, it's just a fail.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as that. I think there is more work to be done, more practice to be done here. For me, I do feel that I can manage it, and definitely the physical practices help me to also go for things outside of practice with more confidence and with more this notion of, if it doesn't happen the way that I planned it, it's okay. But then, very importantly, also, I do have friends who are as skilled in acrobatics and have been uh, practicing as much as I did, who struggle with it outside of the practice, this idea of failing. So
Interesting.
I think there is potential, but I think it also depends a lot on how, who are you? What kind of character do you have? Do you already have this openness to try? I guess there is more to it then, yeah.
So maybe it's something you need to purposefully ignite or purposefully attempt to transfer or something like this. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
is that
And
something you would explore with your students?
I do. I do. It's sometimes it's a little bit limited because people do come to me with this idea of, hey, I want to move well. So initially, it's usually a lot about moving, right? So
Mm.
um, like the skills and the abilities. Then our next step would be, okay, now we do have the skills and the abilities. Now our next step would be creativity. So that's something that is a little bit higher on the list than applying these concepts somewhere else. And already this takes a lot of time. And and only after that, I think we could start to also dabble with this idea of, hey, now all of the things that we do in physical practice, can we also put it outside? And I do have some people who have been studying long term with me who I dabble with these ideas, but
Yeah.
it's usually not directly a part of the process. One thing, for example, that I've been doing a lot in the past is um, is not so much about this idea of failing. Maybe actually it is. It has to do with this idea of letting go. So
Mm.
because I've been practicing so many years, I have been working on so many skills and abilities which I cannot hold at all times. So, like when we practiced back then, I was quite strong in the gymnastic rings, like the upper body strength. Cannot do that stuff anymore at
Yeah.
all. I have the basics down, but I lost it, and that's completely okay. And it's part of the process. And I think this is something that can be beautifully practiced outside of the physical realm, to let go of things and allow yourself to develop further.
Mhm.
And the thing is also, letting go doesn't mean it's like a 100% to 0%. It's still there. So if you would want to come back, there is a way, and you could learn it again, but it's maybe simply not helpful anymore, and also not what sparks joy currently in your life. So
Yeah.
that's something that I do work with people. Yeah, just commit to let go. Do what sparks joy now, and already this gives you so much.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, right? I have this story I tell all the time about the muscle up, and I remember back in 2017 we were doing these like minute long muscle ups and stuff like this, like just playing around with skills like that. But I quite remember this feeling that when I got the muscle up for the first time, and these days it doesn't seem like an impressive skill because there are 15,000 tutorials for free on YouTube that you can get. We didn't have
Mhm.
that back back when we started. It was a quite a difficult skill to get. And I had some sort of charge in my belief structure that if I got a muscle up, I would be have a better life somehow. It was sort of skill that was somehow going to make everything better. And I remember getting it and I was like, yes. And then I walked to the shop and I had this distinct memory of walking down to the shop just being like, "My life is no different. Like, n nothing changes this life. I can do this one thing that I couldn't do before," which is,
Mhm.
like, on its own, kind of pointless unless you need it for something, and it really, like, brought back this question of what's my motivation? That,
Mhm.
the joy thing wasn't actually there. I wasn't doing
Mhm.
these skills for a passion and a joy, and I know some people who love this stuff, and I don't wanna take away from them, but it just wasn't for me.
Of course.
The
Yeah.
joy wasn't there, and I was kind of motivated to do it for the wrong reason. So I think what you're talking about of, like, really quickly, uh, narrowing down on the joy aspect is super crucial because we're in this, like,
Mhm.
culture that's, like, just grind stuff you hate, it's fine. You have
Mhm.
to do it, it's a chore, and physicality doesn't have to be like this. Physicality is so much
Mhm.
fun. You can
Yeah,
link
for
it back a
sure.
bit more to the joy.
Yeah, big time. Joy has been guiding me always in my life, and if there is even a hint of joy, my motivation doesn't need to be as strong, right? As soon as I somehow don't find joy in something that I'm doing, physicality or outside of that, it's very hard for me to stay there when discipline needs to take over, right? Um, and I definitely do also see the value of that. And sometimes certain things in life are simply not joyful, but they have to be done, of course.
Sure.
But in the realm of physicality, which is for most people just a hobby, right? It's, hey, if it's not joyful to you, why are you doing it anyways? So that's also something, a big part of the process when I work with people is figuring out through the process what are the things that really motivate you, that really inspire you, that really spark joy. And for some people, it's just a specific move, and then that's beautiful. Maybe they really want to learn I don't know what it is, like uh, an element, could be anyone, right? And for them, it is connected to so much joy, to so much inspiration somehow. And that's beautiful. Um, but then on the other hand, maybe through the process, you figure out, like you were doing with the muscle up, you have all of these ideas, it's so joyful, then you do it. And it's like, yeah, well, now what? So that's practice also. That's practice to constantly find new joys and new inspirations, new whys for your practice in a way. Um, so yeah, focusing on the joy is very helpful. But then I do also have like a little bit of a counter argument, which then goes more into the realm of, look, okay, you're a human, you're moving, which is already cool. That's perfect. Now you start to develop more time into the practice. Let's say acrobatics, okay, like I am. You develop more time into it, and then all of a sudden, the priority of why you are doing things changes a little bit. So I think the deeper you go into practice, the more you can also handle discomfort and times where there is not so much joy. And I also do think it's extremely helpful and needed in any artistic or even um, craftsman skill. Sometimes the thing is not as fun, but you love it so much, you will still do it anyways.
Yeah.
Um, so it's also about, I don't know if we can say levels, but different
Mm.
approaches maybe, right? For a human just wanting to move out of joy, perfect. I wouldn't push further. But then if there's already the sense of, yeah, but I don't know, I want to go somewhere, I really like it. Then it's like, okay, look, now deeper layers all of a sudden
Yeah.
will be uncovered, and then maybe there's a layer of, yeah, right now it's not that joyful. Can we
Yeah.
still stick to it? Can we still find joy again?
Yeah, maybe the joy becomes like a bit more meta. Like there's a joy of the overall
Mm.
process that's like moving you towards something. That maybe the step is not that fun, but you're engaged in this bigger process that is something that's
Mhm.
sparking some sort of passion for you. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think this is a really cool topic. It's something I study a lot with myself, and in my practice, and the release idea is particularly something that's close to my heart. In my work at the moment, I'm not sure if you've had much of a chance to look into it, what I'm doing, but I'm really focusing on two major qualities. One is opening, and the other is releasing. Um,
Mhm.
and opening with this idea of like connecting and revealing something that was unknown before, right? If I open my hand, it shows the middle of my hand, but also if I open my hand, the tendons all connect inside the hand, right? And the muscle
Mhm.
fibers and things like this. So open connects us up, but releasing softens all the rigidity out of it. If I just
Mhm.
open, it gets stiff, and the releasing actually has this kind of inherently, I don't want to say joyous, but it's more like this nice feeling of like when you put down a burden, right? It's like,
Mhm.
this relief that's just like, oh, right, I didn't even realize I was carrying that burden. And sometimes with this process, as you talked about, like you move through it and then you've just like, I can't keep all of this. I've got to let go of something. And that releasing process has its own satisfaction inside it, its own joy, that it doesn't always have to be the joy of discovering something new. It can be also the joy of letting go of something that's not useful for you at this point in time. And more than that, like coming back around to see an old friend. I've spent 8 years or so, probably since we met. When I met you, I was like right at the end of really being a hardcore movement person, and it all just
Mhm.
stripped away and stripped away and stripped away and stripped away basically to nothing. And it's like only in the last 2 years where it's like, oh, I think that's coming back. And there's this like, I
Mhm.
start to go into some old stuff that I used to do, some tree climbing and things like this. And it's like there's like all these sparks of joy that weren't there before. That's like a rediscovery thing as well. But that wouldn't have really been possible without the release either. So the
Mhm.
releasing aspect, I think, is a really crucial part of this, and something I think everyone who dives deeply into an art runs into at some point. So yeah, maybe you could
Yeah.
talk to your experience with that.
Mhm. Beautiful. And I do have a lot of experience with that. Because l- I don't know if some people are more inclined to that or not, but speaking from my experience, if I do something, I obviously identify more with it. No,
Mm.
I back when I was doing CrossFit, there was like a different part of me that connected to that, which I don't connect to right now anymore. Um, and then obviously as a person, we go through stages, and we develop, and we find new likings and find new things that are all of a sudden more important to us, right? And sometimes what you are doing and who you think you are doesn't match with where you actually need to go, where you actually find joy. And I've been experiencing this a lot in my, let's now just stick with the professional journey of being a teacher, because I've been doing so many different things. I've also taught many different things. And sometimes I noticed I was doing still a thing, and internally there was a little bit of resistance, a little bit of,
Mm.
you know what, something isn't right anymore. And it's not just the like a phase of, currently it's just a little bit too much, I just need a holiday or whatever. No, it's really like a sensation of, I don't know, is this still me? Do I need
Mm.
to let go of it? And over the years, I've been letting go of many different parts of my trainer teacher personality as well. And I think it's absolutely crucial to figure out when this happens, to also take note of, is this a phase, or is this really something that we need to let go of in order to go further, to go deeper, to refine more, right? Um, so a very practical example is, I was doing a lot of online coaching many years back, where I help people find like their physical practice and help them with mobility and strength and handstands and all of that. And at a certain point, I figured like I do like to engage with people on this coaching process, but like writing training programs is just not my thing. I don't like it. Maybe I'm also not that good at it, and it's simply not something that I really enjoy. So that was like a very practical thing that I noticed for a while. Like it feels kind of like a chore in a way doing it. So then I had to go through the process of like I still like to be in this coaching process with people. I still like to be like a helping hand, like a guide somehow, but can I do it else like in a different way? So I had to let go of this idea of like
Yeah, nice.
writing training programs and finding a different way of helping people. So there was something very practical that I can remember, and that feels much better now that I that I'm very aware of that and made certain changes. So I feel good again.
Yeah, nice. I went through something. I have a funny story about this actually. That I was, my journey has gone from I started in Chinese martial arts and I started coaching just because the teacher wasn't there. And so he would be like, "Oh, can you take the class? I can't make it," or whatever. And so I'd just go, "Okay," and kind of guess of how to talk people through stuff. And I really liked that. And then when I became a personal trainer, I really tried to bring some of these elements in of these like esoteric arts and things. And at the time, I was not equipped with enough wisdom, enough knowledge to do that well, and it all kind of fell on its head. So I went on and just started working with the gymnastic strength training, flexibility training. I did a lot of stuff with Kit Lachlan and stretch therapy,
Mhm.
um, and on and on, a lot of natural movement stuff as well. And I ended up running a few workshops. I actually taught them for a little while where I was doing just like strength and mobility. Like, okay, if you want to get a chin up, you need this. If you want to get handstands, you need this. So, if you want to get splits, you need to train like this, and so on and so forth. And I have this funny memory of teaching a workshop that was so well received. Everyone loved it. Technically, it was well presented. The methods were good. I had fun teaching it. And my wife pulled me aside afterwards and she's like, "You taught that workshop well and everyone loved it, but you were dead inside. You shouldn't do it again." And there was just this like moment of like, whoa. And the next weekend I was teaching like a more esoteric topic of like grounding and these kind of like qigong and stuff like this. And when I taught that, she's like, "There was the fire. That's where you were
Mhm.
alive. Do those workshops more." And so I just gave up this idea of teaching this stuff, which had, like you said, had kind of been a core part of my identity. I'm like, but people need this and whatever. And as I let go of it, I also started to realize that I'm not so good at it. There's people out there who are much, much better at programming this stuff and coming up with the plans. And like you, I don't like doing plans for people. I don't want to sit there and go on Monday do 3 by 3, and on Tuesday it's not my style. I teach from a relational perspective. So I'm always talking
Mhm.
about like, how did you find it? What was your experience? This kind of thing. And oh, do we need to adjust it? And I actually teach my students to make their own programs. So like, I don't really want to I'll
Mhm.
be like, "You should probably explore this based on where you are." It's like a gap or whatever. But
Mhm.
I have some pre-recorded videos that have ideas for them, but I want to get this thing across that they can actually do it for themselves, and that this idea of like 3 by 3 and whatever is useful in certain technical realms, but not the be all and end all. So I just let go of it
Mhm.
completely and I just let other people do it. And I still refer people on to coaches if they need strength training like this. I'm like, "You should probably just go see this person. I'm not gonna teach you that stuff, even though I've got capacity back there somehow." I'm like, I haven't done it for a long time either, and I don't particularly want to do it more importantly. So it would have this like me having a chore to do to teach this person
Mhm.
this thing I don't really want to teach. I'm like, "Go learn that, come back, we'll do the internal stuff. I love that stuff." And you'll have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, I really, when you were saying this idea of letting go, I really like, I resonated with that. And I think it's the mark of the experience you can't get from like an 8-week coaching program, right? You have
Mhm.
to go through these years and years and years of these big cycles that might go for 3, 4, 5 years before they wrap up and close up, and maybe they come back 10 years later. But there's no way to shortcut that with
For
a
sure.
retreat or a workshop.
Yeah. I think something else to put into it, because us as teachers, trainers, coaches, whatever you want to frame it, it's also a job, right? So there is also a business aspect to it, and I think that's also an important part of the conversation. That me, for example, in my journey as a teacher trainer, when I felt this pull into a different direction, there was not only the part of myself that feared like this, let's call it loss of identity or new finding of identity, but also this very practical idea of, look, I know I'm quite good at these workshops. I was doing these handstand workshops back then. People like it. It's very nice. I know if I set up a workshop, people will come. So it was also sustaining me on a very like basic level, financial level, right? So going somewhere else also then means, well, your students, are they ready to follow? Will you find new students? So I think that's also something very important on a professional level to also consider, which is also part of the practice in a way, that we're not just teachers, we're also businessmen if you're not employed in a gym or something, right?
Yeah.
Um, Me being self-employed, it's also part of my practice to constantly refine the business aspect, to make sure that also this is in line with everything that I do on the physical level. Um, and this sometimes can also be hard. I have so many colleagues who are doing outstanding work as a teacher, and they're struggling with this business aspect of finding people and going somewhere else, because I don't know, will they lose students or not? So that's also something, yeah, quite helpful to consider, I'd say.
It is, it is. I've definitely struggled with this myself, and over the years, I've had an audience that has shifted from my first audience. When I came to Europe, I was doing a tour of workshops teaching
Mhm,
kind of random movement stuff. It was like this big mush of just everything I had learned, kind of
mhm,
mushed together, and people were really enjoying it because it was different. Basically, it was stuff not available.
mhm,
It was, some I have these strange ways of approaching this and thinking about stuff and coming up with exercises. But I ended up putting that down and shifted to being like a Taoist teacher for a particular school, and that whole audience just disappeared. I was like, "Whoa, what am I gonna do now?" And, thankfully, a new audience kind of, built itself up around this concept of teaching from a school that has a particular way of doing things and all the rest, and people really like that belonging to a system and all and those kind of things. And then I left that, and
mhm.
that whole tide also kind of went out in a way, and I had to rebuild. And that's maybe the hard part of release, that when you let go of things, you really let go of a lot of different things, and that's not been the easiest, pragmatically, and financially,
Mhm.
to survive that. So it's definitely something to consider, the timing of release. It doesn't want to be a rushed thing either. Um, in the cosmology that I work with, the releasing action is more something that you let happen than that you make happen. Um, so you can't really force it. And part of the practice that I teach people physically is how to learn this process in their physical body, so they
Yeah.
can start to connect to these lessons that we've learned through life, in a very physical way, which is always really interesting, because there's some part of us that really wants to rush things and get them done, and
Mhm.
the letting go idea is really like, no, you've got to let it happen in its own time.
Yeah. I do have now a very interesting arc that we can take, because you mentioned now this beautiful idea of letting go, um, I as a thing that happens versus you, like, forcing it, right? Now
Yep.
that actually resonates beautifully in my acrobatic practice.
Nice.
Um, because if we look at, like, the more gymnastic quality, now people see things like this on the TV, where people do like backflips and handsprings and ta 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 ta. It's not too apparent that there is a lot of release also. But then if
Mm.
you look at the things that I am doing, for example, and many other people as well, obviously, there is these moments where you give an impulse, say you're falling into the floor, and then you let it happen. So there is always this. this play between giving something. I I view it like a stone rolling down a hill. And sometimes there is a little uphill, so you need to give it just the right push at the right moment so that it's not effortful. You let it fall, and just at the right moment, there is the next push, and then it falls again. And in my acrobatic practice and the physical practice that I'm doing a lot is really also finding these moments. When can I let it happen? And I'm not forcing it. It's gravity taking my body on a journey. And then all of a sudden, because I don't want to hit the floor, I need to do a small action. And that's the beauty of this practice on a meta level also, the play with letting go and engaging, letting go, engaging. And this is also something that is felt in my body when I do it. It's an absolute joy to feel gravity taking me somewhere. It's a joy to set up myself for a fall to happen, which in acrobatic, if you go deeper, this is needed. There is elements where we know cartwheels, right?
Mhm.
There's an element, it's called an arched cartwheel, which is basically that you let yourself fall through a very arched bridge-like shape. And this is not done by controlling it. This is done by falling into it, by giving in. And I have a huge passion for that. That's it feels so incredible to be able to throw yourself sometimes into these positions, to let yourself actively fall, and then it happens, and then you catch yourself, you direct it, you redirect it, and you do it all over again. It's a play with gravity, with very basic forces, and it feels amazing. So I think what you described there is also to be found in so many practices on a very, very profound level.
This is one of the reasons I really liked following your work, because I see this quality in your work presented in a very physical way, right? With this acrobatic stuff. And I'm like, the essence is similar to what I'm doing. It's just
Mm.
applied kind of in the gross motor control rather than in the very subtle motor control that I'm playing with the internal stuff. But it has this same essence, right? It has this same sense of a lot of the internal stuff really doesn't work while you try and force it. And the more you
Mhm.
try, the more it like jams it up and sticks it up, and it gets all like, it gets bumpy, and it gets possibly even dangerous at some point. And I really found with your stuff, like seeing that moment of exactly what you're talking about. You just have an idea of like pushing it somewhere and then let it run, and it takes
Mhm.
you to there. And even in the meditation practice, one of the big insights I had, you've got, I don't know if you've looked too much into the world of meditation. I'm sure you've done a little bit in your time, but you've got plenty of traditions where they have like picture something in your mind, like a visualization or a shape or a mantra or whatever. And it's always the instruction is given that when you're picturing this thing, if a distraction comes up, leave the distraction and come back to this thing. And at some point, I was training and training and training, and it wasn't really, there was just never ending distractions. And I said, what's going on? Some of the texts say that it's meant to stabilize and all the rest after shorter times than I've been practicing for years and years. And what I realized is it wasn't about like this severance from that to get back to this, but rather about this invitation of those parts of the mind to join in on this. And when I started doing that, it's like, oh, the mind gathered up. And then there was this nuance of I could like force it together, but that doesn't work
Mhm.
either, because that takes like those parts of the mind are trying to shape up as distractions, and like you go against that to try and make whatever thing you're picturing in your mind. And I noticed that actually, if you take this release quality and allow it to come together, then it takes its time, but it forms up in a much more stable way, and it settles at some point, and it gets this thing. So I was like, this quality of release is really like an allowing something to happen that still has a prompt, right? I like to talk about an origin and a destination. Where are you releasing from and where are you releasing to? That still needs to kind of be set up. Um, but with those two prompts, you can let the pathway in between shape itself up and take whatever avenue it needs to. And so, of course, I'm doing all of this with like internal awareness and things like this. But like, when I see your work, I'm like, It's kind of the same." There's this like external or physical version of this that really like grabs my eye when I see you do stuff. So that's really
Yeah,
cool
I
that comes
guess.
from that.
Nice. I would have a question now for you because you were
Mhm.
describing that now. Can you give like a very practical example of how that could look if, for example, if you're in a meditation and a simple thought comes up, like what can I, what will be my dinner tonight,
Mm.
versus if like a sensation comes in, like, I don't know, like an itch or something. How
Yeah.
would you then try to invite this? What would be the
The
question?
essence of release is the same across any of it, right? There is the frame I use for this is the non-dual frame, so that all of our experiences, we have five senses, and then we have a vast amount of experience happening in our mind at any point. They can all be viewed as kind of awareness shaping itself into all these experiences, right? Because for our vision, for example, we're not seeing the world. Light hits our eyes, changed to an electrical signal, sent to the brain, filtered, and a kind of thing is presented to consciousness, a visual experience. And what's like, I started asking, what's this made of, this experience? Um, and same with the felt. So at some point, it's just sensory experience, right? It's sensory experience shaped as a bodily itch, shaped as a visual experience, shaped as a sound experience, shaped as an odor, or shaped as a thought, or shaped as, so everything is just shaping itself up. So for this mind drill, I really like take the idea that even a physical itch, you can release it and let it join the mental structure. It doesn't have to stay in the physical realm. It's all awareness. It's just
Mm,
awareness kind of shaping up into more or less things. So of course the physical body tends to have more of a stability to it than the mental body. The mental body changes really rapidly and suddenly, whereas the physical body is a bit more fixed. But you can definitely do it. And this is this is a bit more like most people don't think on this level straight away. Most people are just trying to get the
mm,
mind together. And when you get the body to also gather and you're gathering it in the mind, then you end up with something very weird because you'll lose your body at some point if you
mhm,
absorb enough of it into the mind. And that can have a feeling like an outer body experience that can give a little,
mhm,
little jolt to the system. That needs to be approached kind of carefully and be framed and set up for the student. But more interesting than that is that's the heart of doing what's called the Dantian work, the work of the lower center,
mhm,
is actually the gathering of all the physical pressure and sensory experience into the belly and all the mental pressure and experience into the belly until it forms up in this very kind of strange ball-like feeling in the center of the belly
mm.
that ends up being the heart of all the internal stuff, the called the dantian.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it can
Interesting.
really like the physical and the mental stuff can come together and kind of mix in a very strange way.
Yeah. If I can I describe a quick experience and you let me know if
Please.
this is kind of like in this realm? So,
Yeah.
what I do sometimes, I like to go to saunas, and what I sometimes like to do in the sauna when I'm sitting there, and we in Germany call it an Aufguss. It's basically when the sauna master like puts water and like
Yeah.
uh, goes there with a towel, no? Um, and then obviously there's a lot of humidity and you sweat, so I will sit there, close my eyes, and I simply let the droplets of sweat and humidity like run off my body, and it itches a lot.
Yes.
So sometimes I sit there and I simply try to let it happen. I don't try to do anything. And
Mm.
sometimes I really am in this more agitated state where I feel like it feels like I'm forcing myself to not do anything.
Yep.
And sometimes if I get it, let's say right, it simply happens, and then after a while I forget that I'm doing it, and then I remember like, oh wow, I'm not moving. It's okay. And sometimes I would even increase that with not swallowing, just for the fun of it, for the experience. So
Nice.
sitting there, not swallowing, and letting the droplets of humidity, moisture, whatever, run down. And this is really hard, but it also only works, especially the not swallowing, if I allow myself to kind of take note of the sensation, but then also try to forget it in a way, but not in a I want to forget it, but I just need to let it go. I
Yeah.
don't know. Were these descriptions enough to give an estimate?
Yeah, yeah. It's not the exact same thing as the gathering idea because the
Mhm.
gathering idea is really doing something specific. Bringing all of this sensory experience towards something in the mind or something in the body. Usually in the body. I don't use too much of the mind. I use this as a quick drill to get people familiar with the action.
Mhm.
but then apply it to the body more than anything because we're in our mind too much already. Um, but this is more like what we would go for in a full release, right? That you're
Mhm.
releasing all notions that it's meant to be other than it is.
Mhm.
Right. This is kind of like the more meta version of that. And part of that releases not necessarily the appearance of a thought or belief structure, but releases the investment in it. And it's that
Mhm.
investment that I believe I shouldn't be itching, or I believe this thing shouldn't be there, or there's some sort of investment in a belief structure that then causes all these reactions. And when you release that investment, the thought can still appear, I shouldn't be doing this, but you're not believing it. So it doesn't have this like carry on effect. It just appears and disappears, the same as a sensory experience appears and disappears. But you can definitely like release yourself outside of the physical body where you stop feeling stuff going on. You can have like a release into the sensory experience where instead of like losing it, you get like crystal clear knowledge of it, but it stops bothering you. There's all sorts of options that I explore with my students for different
Mhm.
reasons at different levels and depending on where they're at. That's really really fun to play with. But um, one of the things I do in my practice is I teach them the common dynamic, right? Release is a particular dynamic that if they get the hang of the essence of it, it can be translated into different realms, into realms like
Yeah.
meditation and then into physicality. And so I really emphasize this from the start. I'm like, here's the dynamic. We're doing it physically for now. But just know that you can take this into an emotional response and a mental response and a meditation and a this and a that. And so I from the start really encourage them to look at the underlying essence, not that particular expression of that essence, so that they
Mhm.
tune into the essence. And then some of them take it into their music. To release into music is just to let it play, right? Let the song play itself. And the cool thing is it's like when people are given the idea to connect with this essence, it works pretty quick.
Mhm.
They just almost need permission, right? To say, oh, we
Mm.
can translate realms. Then, oh, but which realms? All of them. Try them all, and practice. And
Mhm.
and I've even had some students who are psychologists who have just been sitting there talking, and then they've just had this like global release, and they're like, the session went so much better. The person
Mhm.
whatever, and I don't even know what I did. There was just a release that I couldn't describe. So you get all
Yeah.
this kind of thing, and that's what I've really focused on in my work is like getting to the underlying essence of things, and then you can explore this essence through physicality, through meditation, through whatever avenue, as long as you can kind of connect to the essence of stuff and deepen it. Um,
Beautiful.
and this is
Beautiful.
again one of the reasons why I wanted you on here, because like part of what I'm doing helps me recognize what you're doing, even though I can't do the
Yeah.
still expression. The essence has a very it's not identical, but it's very similar. And particularly for people following me who are like, well, Craig does all this qigong and stuff, and that's cool, but I'm more interested in something more physical. I'm like, go to Neil. He'll sort you out. It's like it's really complementary to the stuff I'm exploring, and again, it kind of floats in the background as something I might come back to at some point. We'll have to see how things go.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. What you've described there, really, it. I think I don't um gr- like grasp it fully because I'm not practicing it that much, mm, with a lot of awareness. But I think I get the notion because it is happening when I do my things, right? So I think it's a process that is happening, but I'm not so aware of it.
Yeah.
So it's wildly fascinating if you talk about this. It's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like something inside of me remembers, but it's like, yeah, yeah, I think there is something like that.
Yeah.
And to me, it also connects a little bit to this. It's also something else, but it maybe also kind of works in a similar way. This idea of flow, this idea of creative,
Yeah.
like a creative channel. No, sometimes if I do my like in the acrobatic practice or like in video editing or anywhere else, all of a sudden I'm in this thing where I release so much that things tend to happen and tend
Yes.
to simply flow. And this is something absolutely beautiful that, by the way, some of the workshops I teach are also called finding flow for a reason.
Nice.
It's not creating flow, but it's sometimes we find it maybe. And if we create good circumstances, maybe we can find it a little bit more easy. But sometimes it stays hidden, right?
Hmm. Nice. That's super cool. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have some language around this that I like to use from the more esoteric perspective. A big study of mine is the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious, right? And
Hmm.
our culture has the Western culture, as a whole, the modern world, modernity has this tendency to, if they are aware of something, they control it. And if they're not going to control it, they don't want to be aware of it. Whereas this flow
Hmm.
state, it's like being aware but not controlling, right? So
Hmm.
it's kind of
Hmm.
like in between state that's a mix of the two opposing forces where the conscious mind is engaged because you're aware, but the unconscious is the one that has the kind of keys to the car, so to speak. And when that's really set free, some really incredible stuff can happen. And the more I dive into this, the more I'm like, the unconscious is where that's the business end of the stick, right? That's where the cool
Hmm.
stuff happens. And I have some simple examples. Driving is probably the perfect example. That when people learn to drive, there is this moment as a learner that you're conscious of what you're doing, and there's all this like over controlling everything, and it's all clunky. At some point, you get familiar with it, and typically, what happens at that point is people stop paying attention to what they're doing. They have a podcast, they're talking to whatever, they're not paying attention to their
Hmm.
actions anymore. Um, and you will find that if you bring your awareness back to the action, and if you can release the control but be like keenly aware of what's going on, that even though you're not trying to achieve anything because you're just aware of what's going on, it evolves. It starts
Hmm.
changing. It doesn't change in the way we want it to change, usually not at the pace we want it to change, because the unconscious is
Hmm.
slower than the conscious mind, but it changes. And actually, if you can let this potentiality open up even more, it changes in ways that we can't contrive with our mind. And I think you
Hmm.
must have experienced this with your flow, right? You can
Hmm.
plan the most exquisite, but it's not the same where you kind of just let go and let it move through you, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
so the way I kind of frame this is the unconscious comes in. And the
Yeah.
body is the physical expression of the unconscious. All of our cells, we're not consciously really connected to them. They do their things. Heart pumps, immune stuff works, and most of the muscles work beyond conscious control. We gesture and stuff and change our posture based on unconscious movements, not on conscious
Hmm.
deliberate decision, right? So to let
Yeah.
this unconscious express through you, I think is something really incredible and something that we're missing a lot in the modern world. And so when I see people finding a way into that, whether it be through physical acrobatics or music or art or whatever, there's something that happens when that's whatever the unconscious, whatever you want to call it, spirit or whatever, kind of takes you over and works through
Yeah.
you, not because of you. That's like sacred, right? It's like the heart of the kind of divine aspect of nature that's
Yeah.
interesting to explore.
Yeah. Wildly fascinating. And coming back maybe to physicality for a second, that I practice moves and techniques. I practice sequences, so stitching things together. I practice concepts and ideas, so finding qualities in what I do. And then I also practice improvisation, open form. And this is also, I think, where what we've just described here, or what you also just described here, is to be found a lot if people um, are are willing to go there. So improvisation really is the state where maybe you start standing and you have an idea. For example, let's move in a way that reminds me of a cat. Okay, a very simple idea. So with this idea in mind, you start to move, and maybe through time you feel more and more, wow, okay, the body is moving. I'm not thinking too much, but things are starting to happen more and more. And all of a sudden, you're like, okay, can I in the scenario throw in an acrobatic element? And then maybe at first it's a little bit forced, right? So
Yeah,
you're kind of faking it.
yeah.
And then more and more, the more you practice, all of a sudden you will find these moments of surprise where your body does a thing, you are doing a thing basically, that you are not doing. So it happens, it comes out of you. And this is also something in the practice that I'm doing is one of the most joyful things, that if you set up the frame, if you set up the circumstances for things to be able to happen, sometimes they magically do appear.
Yeah.
And that's such an interesting part. And this is also something very difficult for beginners usually, unless they are coming from a field where they have been improvising before. So if a musician comes to my workshops, they're extremely new to acrobatics, basically no skill there, but they know how to improvise. They know about the process. For them, it's much easier than for a person coming from, I don't know, like they've been training, but they don't are so well equipped in the improvisational world, so they will struggle a lot. So this is something also with students that I do a lot, is trying to find open frames where we can move from within rather than forcing something.
Mm.
And many people find it very awkward at first. It's like, why? Okay, I'm moving all of a sudden. I don't know what to do. I'm just like waving around, and it feels odd. Are people watching? What am I doing? And and it can be quite uncomfortable. But I think it's an extremely beneficial part of practice that is also very inspirational after a while, to simply allow yourself to get moved from within, and move from imagination, move from sensation. For example, standing on a grass field, there is sun on your skin, you close your eyes, you feel the breeze of the wind. Absolute beautiful sensation. Why not use it in order to all of a sudden, whoa, I can move with it, right? So that's something, a little add-on to throw in here, that some people could really enjoy.
Nice. I think that's a really lovely time to also just bring this slowly to a close, because I know you've got some stuff
Mhm.
to do, and I also have to go have dinner and
Yeah.
things like this. So it's been such a wonderful talk. Really lovely to reconnect. It's been a while since we had a, we chat here and there, but it's been nice to have this like longer, stronger connection. Um, Maybe just to end, you can kind of plug yourself. You've got online services, some courses and things like that. Just I'll put links in the show notes as well. But tell people what services you offer and where they can find you.
Cool, yeah. Honestly, if you would just put my name into Google, you will find many different channels. Mm. I guess if people are quite at the start of the journey and want to experience a little bit what I'm doing, go to my YouTube channel. This has been running now quite well, and I'm uploading every week, from very basic ideas to a little bit more intermediate things, but like things that everyone really can simply try. So that's a great thing. It's also obviously for free, so you can go and get an idea. And then if you want to dive deeper, there's obviously the workshops, which is always cool to be in person. And then there's online programs, and I have different ones. You can simply check out the online shop that I have. The programs are made in a way that they're quite user friendly, videos and everything. But I guess the first step is really go to YouTube, try some of the things, see if they resonate, and from there you will find everything else.
Cool. Are you doing some like one-to-one mentoring at this point in time?
Yes, but in a little bit of a different form. So again, like I was saying, not too much of a training program. It's more like process oriented. People, we communicate back and forth. So there would be also a way if people are interested. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And lastly, I don't know if it's the case, but I think you were making some noises about possibly coming to this side of the world, Australia, visiting in the near future.
Honestly, I think it will happen. Yeah. I
Nice.
was planning doing it this year, but I was going to the States instead. So, but I definitely want to visit Australia privately for me. And if a workshop could happen, that would be amazing.
Nice. So if there are any listeners who are keen to host Neil in any of the cities around Australia, please get in touch with me, or if you can find Neil on his website, get in touch with him. We can maybe connect some people through the various networks that I have, because I'm sure I know someone. Well, I know lots of people who are in this world, so there's got to be someone out there
Mhm.
who can host you. And at any rate, after this conversation, I'm like super keen to catch up with you in person and just like play and explore and stuff around, show you a bit of the stuff I'm doing, but also get a bit of in-person taste for what you're doing too. So definitely looking forward to that. I hope it happens sooner rather than later, but let's see how the stars align.
So much. And I really have to say, I really enjoyed this conversation. There was not too technical about the skills and whatever, but really the things happening behind. I really like speaking and conversing about these things. And I I think you're doing such a great job. So thank you so much. I
Thanks,
feel
man.
very good after
Appreciate you
this
coming on
conversation.
board. Man, I just loved having you here. I love hearing your insights. You know, part of the role, I feel like this podcast is a bit here to let people know, about my overall approach to this cultivation work, but also to let people know that there's really interesting people out there doing not
Mm.
standard stuff that's super interesting. And then I get so much out of talking to people because I have some kind of things I know that you do that I want you to talk about, but usually if I get the questions right, then you start talking about stuff, and then I'm like a little kid, like, yeah,
Mhm,
cool. What
mhm,
else is going to come out? And there was plenty of moments like that in this talk. So happy to have had you on the show, and maybe we can do it again at some point in the future. Cool, man. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks to everyone for listening, and thanks for Neil for coming on board. Check the show notes. I'll put a bunch of links to his stuff in, but also, you can Google stuff as well. And yeah, we'll call it a day there. Thanks, everybody.